Good evening. I'm George Herbig, Chief Forecaster here with Weather Now Kentucky, and we do have significant severe weather possible for tomorrow, which will be March 30th of 2025. Of course, we'll give it a couple moments before we dive into all of the information that we're going to show you tonight. As we're waiting, if you wouldn't mind, please tap the share button at the bottom portion of your screen. Of course, with it being a critical alert day, I hope that you guys help us with sharing the material out on your news feeds. That way your friends and family can view it and helping us to spread the accurate information out. We do have multiple severe weather alert days coming up, but of course, in this broadcast, we'll focus mainly on the first one. I'll touch briefly on the potential for Wednesday, which, in my opinion, at this point, might be a bit more significant than what we're going to see tomorrow. But that one is still about 4 or 5 days out. So hopefully we have some time there for things to trend down. Just at this point, it's looking like quite the rough week ahead. Also, something that's getting lost in a lot of the information that's being sent out is the amount of rainfall that we're going to see over the next 7 days. Many models have the rainfall totals approaching or going over double digits for a lot of folks in the state. Some models even up toward a foot of rainfall. So quite the abundance of rain on the way, quite the abundance of wind energy on the way, quite the abundance of all modes of severe weather tomorrow. And again, if you're just now tuning in here, you have not missed a thing. We're going to give it probably another minute or so before we start on things, so we have time to share the broadcast. I appreciate all those folks that are already doing that for us. Shelly, Laura, Jessica, Ricky, Haley, Teresa, everyone else, thank you for sharing the broadcast. Gail, again, all those folks that may not be showing up there. Jessica, thank you for sharing the broadcast. I appreciate your guys' help with that. Again, sharing the broadcast is probably the number one way you can support us. And number two, it helps us to spread the information out and try to clear up some of the miscommunication that's occurring because social media is just crazy with things. So again, if you're just now tuning in here, we do have significant severe weather possible tomorrow. Again, I'll show you the latest forecast as well as the latest model data. We'll touch briefly on Wednesday as well. So we'll go over all that good stuff for you guys. I forgot to pull up one website here, so let me pull this up real quickly. Again, as always, I almost forgot. Make sure you say hello as you're coming into the broadcast. I would like to greet you guys. Deb, Audrey, Maria, Silver over there on YouTube. I appreciate you guys for tuning on in. Yes, we are live on both YouTube and Facebook tonight, as always. So if you don't want to hold us in your hand, you can put us up on your smart TV on YouTube. Robin, Destiny, Pods, Unlimited, Mindy, Kelly, thank you all for all the shares on the broadcast, all the likes and stuff that I'm seeing come across the screen. Once we get to about 75 shares, I know that's about the time to start there. I've been doing this long enough, I know kind of the feel for when things should roll there. April, Jennifer, Melissa, Caitlin, hello. I appreciate you guys tuning in, trusting us, and your support. Hey, thanks for the info, Katie. Thank you for tuning in. Clayton, hello. Phil, Maddie, Tammy, hello. Brenda, hello. Maria with the $5 donation on YouTube. I appreciate that so much. Thank you very much, my friend. Again, I want to give it about maybe 10 more seconds, and then we'll start rolling through. How much time are we at? Okay, yeah, perfect. Perfect. Okay, we'll go over all that CMAC. We'll cover everything that we're looking at here. All right, so again, if you're just not tuning in here, just go over our intro there. We do have multiple severe weather alert days coming up, not only tomorrow, but on Wednesday, and potentially maybe Friday and Saturday as well. That's a way down the road there compared to what we're looking at for tomorrow. I do think the most significant day out of the next 2 or 3 events is going to be Wednesday night. But on this broadcast, we'll talk more about Sunday and Monday. Again, I'll touch briefly about what Wednesday might look like, but you guys know how I roll on these types of events. I like to take it one at a time, because when you start spreading out information across multiple events, when you haven't gotten through the first one yet, a lot of details can begin to start getting skewed. Katie, thank you for becoming a supporter on Facebook. I appreciate that extra level of support. Thank you so much. All right, again, want to say real quickly, thank you to everyone that's sharing the broadcast. I appreciate you guys. Everyone that's liking it and tuning in, thank you guys again. All right, let's roll into the information here. So what we're going to look at first is the current radar and the current dew points, and then we're going to look at the SPC's forecast, and then we're going to look at model data and go into some different model stuff that we're looking at here. All right, we're going to kind of give you the full spiel so that you guys can understand what's happening here. So across right now, what we're seeing across the state, just some light rains. Again, kind of hit and miss rains today. This is not going to be severe, nothing of any real concerns. Matter of fact, it looks like it's already beginning to dry up on the southern side here, because this was a lot more full back about an hour and a half ago. So it looks like that's already beginning to dry up on the southern side there. So no real concerns tonight. Once again, just want to point that out there. No real concerns tonight or tomorrow morning. But you may see hit and miss rain all the way through tomorrow afternoon. Here are your current dew points across the area, and this is kind of this setting the stage already. So this morning, dew points were in the low 40s. Now they're kind of ramping up to the mid 50s to upper 50s, maybe even a little couple of low 60s out there. And that moisture is starting to move into place from the Gulf down there, and that's going to allow for these storms to have a better moisture pool to work with. I will say that out of all the storms that we've seen this year, and maybe even the last 6 to 8 months, I think tomorrow has the best moisture levels to work with, mainly because the moisture will already be in place for multiple hours. Our last few storm chances, the reason that they've either gone one way or the other is because the moisture either quite hasn't been there or it was just too late. This time around, that probably won't be an issue. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second. So we're going to look at the raw model data here in just one moment so you can get an idea of the timing of everything. What I want to show you now is just the current SPC outlook. Again, this hasn't changed. The next update on this would be around 2 a.m. Eastern time. At that point, I do expect that they'll probably add a moderate risk somewhere out in western Kentucky, maybe stretching over towards central Kentucky. We'll see how that trends there. And the reason I think that is because they've already kind of set the stage with this severe wind outlook. You see how you have this large hatched area here. And in red, this is a 30 to 44% chance of severe winds. Severe winds being anything greater than or equal to, I believe, 57 miles per hour. All right. And this hatched area is the 10% probability of significant wind gusts, which is hurricane level winds, which are greater than or equal to 74 mile per hour. So they're kind of already setting the stage for a moderate to roll out. They just haven't quite done it yet. And the reason for that is because one of the main models that everyone looks at, called the rapid refresh, was kind of lagging behind on things. It kind of didn't really buy into Sunday. I will tell you that when we just looked at the latest run of the rapid refresh, it started to actually trend the way of the other models, starting to buy into a little bit more spin in the atmosphere for tomorrow, and a little bit less rainfall, so a little bit more juice for these storms to work with tomorrow. So I do believe that at some point late tonight, whenever they do their overnight outlook, that we'll probably see a level 4 out of 5 risk. At this point, though, I don't think it really matters. The colors are one thing. I think we made our bullseye map, and I'll show it to you in just a second. But what I want to kind of show you just is the general outlooks of everything here. So here's your tornado map. Again, kind of gets to about I-65 and cuts off. That's about how it usually goes around here. Obviously, we see more tornadic activity in the western side of the state rather than the eastern side of the state. Big reason for that is the big hills over here at eastern Kentucky love to kill storms, and this is why you don't see as much severe weather out here as you do out in western Kentucky, where it is much flatter. All right, so a very simple explanation on that one. I know a lot of people are like, well, how do these storms always get to I-65 and just die down? But there's a very valid reason. Once again, very low elevations, very flat elevations over there in western Kentucky. Very rugged, very up and down elevations out here in eastern Kentucky, and that's why most storms die down there. Of course, you can still get severe weather, but most of your storms will die by the time they get out to eastern Kentucky. The main threat, though, of course, once again, being the severe winds for tomorrow. I think we'll definitely see a plethora of damaging wind reports tomorrow. That to me is the main headline. Yes, we do have a 10% chance, 10 to 14% chance in this yellow zone of tornadic activity with a hatched area of the potential for significant tornadoes, which is anything greater than EF2. But I still don't think this is the headline for tomorrow. I think the headline for tomorrow is the damaging winds, because again, you can still get numerous damages, numerous injuries. Hell, I've even seen fatalities just from winds. So you're talking about wind speeds up to 75, maybe even 80 mile per hour tomorrow in the middle of, golf ball sized hail falling. You're talking about the potential there for a lot of injuries to occur, a lot of damages to vehicles, a lot of damages to houses, a lot of damages to anyone that's caught outside. Travel is definitely not recommended tomorrow night once that line begins to approach our area, because once again, with those hailstones start flying around in 70 mile per hour winds, they will not hesitate to shatter your windshield. All right. A severe hail outlook kind of looks like this. I did trim it back a little bit, which I agree with. I think once these storms get past the Ohio River and start getting down toward, let's say, Frankfort, maybe even Bowling Green, Corbin, Lexington, once they get to about that yellow region, I think the main risk is damaging winds. I think the hail threat, you will still see hail, but it begins to fall off on the size of the hail. Whereas in this red zone, we do believe that up to golf ball, maybe even tennis ball sized hail possible in this red zone. For those that don't know, I'm seeing if I have an example around here. I don't see one. Goodness gracious. I was hoping I got lucky and had just like a little ball or something sitting here. But I don't have anything sitting. Oh, you know what? I was looking for my son's toys, and I think I took them all out of here. But tennis ball size tail, even golf ball size tail, heck, even ping pong ball size tail is plenty enough to cause damages. So once again, this red zone is probably the highest zone for hail, and that does include the Louisville area. It does include northern Hardin County, out toward Owensboro, Madisonville, Paducah. Kind of begins to drop off around the Grayson County area, southern Hardin County area, out to Nelson County, Taylor County, that heart of Kentucky there, and kind of begins to drop as you head to the east there, where damaging winds become the main factor. All right. So again, I think yes, we do have a tornado risk tomorrow, and yes, it is a substantial one. Definitely a little bit larger than what we usually deal with around here. But I don't think that's the main headline. I wouldn't be surprised if we only end up with 1 or 2 tornadoes tomorrow. I think we'll see more than that. But I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if you just see a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of damaging wind and hail reports. Before we move on to look at the model data, I do want to show you that there is a risk already posted for Wednesday, and this does include a 30%, which is an enhanced risk. I will tell you that in Kentucky, getting a 30% risk on day 5, which is 5 days out, is pretty rare for us. It's pretty rare for us. And again, I'll kind of touch briefly on the models, kind of what this looks like for Wednesday. I'm not going to touch too much on it because I want to focus more on Sunday and Monday. But I will say, I think this will be our greatest threat, and probably since May 26th of 2024. I think this is probably your greatest threat since then. Again, the wind energy and the surface energy and the moisture energy that we're looking at for Wednesday, and they're all mixing together. I think it's a very potent recipe, unfortunately, for long-lived violent tornadoes. Not saying I'm going to guarantee that in Kentucky, but you can see the SPC already has enough confidence here. SPC, by the way, being the National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center, already has enough confidence here to put a more targeted bullseye on western, central, and even northern Kentucky for Wednesday. So once again, just wanted to point that out there to you. No risk posted for Saturday yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more storms on Saturday as well, but we're not going to talk about that in this broadcast. The pattern that we're heading into is absolutely not an hyperbole. It is a very, very, very active pattern. So what I want to pull up for you now is the model data that we're seeing here. I want to say real quickly, thank you to everyone again for all the new, I've seen a bunch of new followers and subscribers. Thank you guys very much for your support. We appreciate that. All right, what I want to do now is kind of just go to the regional view here, kind of show you the generals of what's happening, and then we'll zoom into the local view where you have all the nameplates and you can see all the city labels and all that fancy stuff. All right. So throughout tonight, into the overnight, into the morning hours, we're actually going to be watching this band out here in Missouri very closely. The reason this matters, you're probably saying, George, why does a band out in Missouri matter when we're not going to see that band? The reason is this band on some models eventually dies by the time it gets to the Illinois and Missouri border where my cursor is, and that's very important because if it does die down there, it leaves what we call an outflow boundary. An outflow boundary will kind of just drift around and kind of be an invisible layer in the atmosphere. And once enough moisture and energy and a nice short wave gets over to it, it'll spark, almost like a line of gasoline. You'll see storms just pop up out of nowhere. And that's where all those folks that are talking about HARP and weather manipulation stuff, that's where they're kind of crazy going. Talking about, oh, this storm just popped up out of nowhere. There's a reason for it. There's an outflow boundary there. There's a scientific reason for it. Sorry, I had to do it. I've been seeing it a lot the last couple of days. And no, there's a very scientific reason for that. And so what we're going to watch is exactly where the storm line dies down, if it dies down, how that progresses through the late morning to early afternoon. Because if it does leave an outflow boundary here, we may see supercells spark up in front of the actual main line of storms. And that is referred to as a confluence band. All right, advance this on forward. You'll see what I mean. The model has that storm dying down there. And you'll see these just kind of drift, all this line's kind of drift off to the south here. And once it does, it'll eventually meet up with that moisture, that low pressure, that greater energy and wind shear there, and eventually will spark a line of storms. Advancing this forward, I kind of want to show you, there goes that spark of the line of storms to the north here. You'll see the spark begin to happen out here in southern Missouri, northern Arkansas. This is an area, by the way, where I feel like you could probably see a couple of very rough tornadoes, eastern Arkansas, western Tennessee, western Kentucky. All right, advancing this forward. This is valid for around, let's say 6 p.m. tomorrow. You'll see just an absolutely disgusting line of storms has developed all the way from the Great Lakes down to the northern Arkansas area there. Again, I'll get to all your questions here in just a moment, okay? I promise if you listen for a little bit, I bet you the questions get answered pretty rapidly. All right. I promise I'll get to all your questions here at the end of the broadcast. All right, advancing this forward, this is valid for around 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You will see all these whites and browns and purples and all this good stuff showing up out here in Western Kentucky. Those are all indications of rotating supercells pretty much along this entire line. That does not automatically mean that tornadoes are going to be occurring. Hang on. Okay, I thought I saw something weird in the chat there. I thought I saw something weird in the chat there. Okay. What was I at there? So rotating supercells don't always mean tornadic activity is going to occur. Again, we have to kind of just wait and see kind of how these storms are based here. And the reason I'm talking about that is if you look at the wind column here, I showed you guys this yesterday. Don't just look at this fancy word here. This does mean a PDS tornado. But again, this is just an automatically spit out number here. The thing that we're looking at that's kind of unclear at this point. We know that all the energies are there. We know that all this down here is lit up. We know we have good stuff in place. The unclear thing at this point is the wind energy as you go up into the atmosphere. So if you look at your winds here, they all kind of go in the same direction, same direction, same direction. Then they turn at the surface. Typically, this would indicate rotation is occurring, and that is the case. Rotation is occurring. However, surface-based rotation. Let me pull up my pen real quickly. See if I still have it downloaded. It's been a while since I've used it. I'm going to pull up my pen because I kind of want to show you this. I think this is something that's very important to understand. I know this sounding looks absolutely crazy, what you're seeing on your screen, but I think this is something that's very important to understand because this is the very big reason why a lot of our storms are either hail and damaging wind producers or tornado producers. Where in the world is my arrow? Hold shift to draw vertical. What in the world? Oh, I got it. That is a very thick arrow. But, and of course I can't move that. Oh my goodness. I am choking on the main stage here. We see how these winds go north to south here at the surface. Typically, a lot of folks will look at that and say, oh, that is rotating winds. And that is, but that is elevated rotation. In order for a storm to rotate to produce tornadic activity at the surface, these winds need to do what we call backing. They need to go across the wind field there. They need to be the opposite way almost as the rest of the winds that are going up into the atmosphere. They need to turn at the surface. Let me see if I can show you an example of this real quickly. Let me get the arrows off our screen here. I want to see if I can show you an example of this. And I think this is really important to understand because once again, this is how our storms are either surface-based or elevated. Elevated storms produce hail and damaging winds. Surface-based storms produce tornadoes. So I want to show you a sounding from Wednesday, for example. Let's see if I can get a good example here. Trying to find us a really good example to go off of. These are all just straight up and down. Of course, I cannot find a good example to go off of. How tragic. How tragic. Wonder if I can find one on the NAM model. How tragic. Yeah, that's just tragic. Now, you still can get tornadoes to occur in that type of wind field, but 9 times out of 10, those storms are going to eventually be ingested up into the upper layers of the atmosphere and turn more elevated rather than producing supercells or tornadoes. Or I'm sorry, tornadoes from those supercells. So that's why I think, in my opinion, the leading concern tomorrow is damaging winds and hail. Can we see tornadoes? Yes. Do I think we will see tornadoes? Yes. But I don't think that's the main headline for tomorrow. All right. So zooming this into the local view here. Now that we've gone over all the jibber jab, I want to show you the local view. Just kind of time it out here with you. If you look up at the top left portion of your screen there, you'll see the times in Central Time. If you want it in Eastern, just add an hour to it. For example, this would be 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Sunday, March 30th. All right, advancing this forward. A couple of few cells may pop up early in the afternoon. Again, this will pop up before the actual energy gets into place here, so I don't expect to see too many severe cells in the early afternoon. It's more so the late afternoon to the evening time frame where those better helicities, those better wind shears, the 850 millibar, a few thousand feet above our head, that's finally when that moves into place there. All right, so this is valid for 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The HRRR model has it knocking on Western Kentucky's border at this point. 8 p.m. Eastern Time, you'll see it's now entering Western Kentucky, far portions of Fulton County, going out there toward Callaway County, so on and so forth. Around 9 p.m. Eastern Time, you can see the arc of this, by the way. So it has a nice little arc to it. or arch, whatever you want to call it. All these purples showing up here are either going to be supercells or they're going to be large hail producers. So you can see very numerous cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hail producers just in the Evansville to about Fulton County area, Hickman, Kentucky, down there in southwestern portions of the state. Maybe even some hail producers up here straggling in front of the line. These might be rogue supercells that pop up in front of this line. We'll have to be very careful of that. Keep a very close eye on that. That might be something that we have to watch. If we do see cells begin to pop up in front of the line, those will likely be surface-based storms that may produce tornadoes as they scoot north across the line there. Advances forward to 9 to 10 p.m. You'll see that line begins to break up a little bit according to the HRR model. This is where models begin to differ, because I'll show you this as well. But the NAM3K model has this thing as a very long line, just a wall of winds and hail, almost its entire way through Kentucky. This is where the HRR model begins to differ a little bit. And I also will kind of caution those that do look at models. The HRR model a day out on the 48-hour runs tends to over-convect a little bit. Like a lot of this stuff right here probably won't be happening on the front side. So that's obviously going to change how these storms evolve as they push through Kentucky. But again, right after it kind of goes through that process, it snaps back to reality a little bit, brings it all back to a line here. So again, I think a lot of this stuff that you're seeing out here in front of the line on this model may not be occurring tomorrow. All right, let's look at all these little cores in here. I mean, all the way from Cincinnati, Ohio, down back toward Mayfield, Kentucky, just in that slanted line there by about 11 p.m. Eastern time. You get to see all those different cells there that may be producing large hail, damaging winds, and yes, even a tornado or two within this line as it keeps continuing to push east. By the time it starts to get more into a uniform line like that, you'll see how it was kind of broken back here. This is what we refer to as a discrete quasi-linear convective system, where we do have basically a line of storms, but there are also some gaps within that line. It's kind of a double mode, if you will. Advancing this forward, you'll see it kind of turns eventually all into one uniform, nice, pretty line there. Just a massive wall of winds and hail as it continues to push to the southeast. But once that does congeal into a line, the line begins to weaken. It will still produce damaging winds and large hail across that area, but by the time this gets to about Somerset and Pikeville, it does begin to start to drop its threat. It still might produce severe weather, but it won't be nearly anything like it was back out here toward Evansville or Paducah, so on and so forth. So that's the HRR model. I will show you the NAM3K model, but first I'm going to show you our forecast that we posted earlier in case you missed it. This is not the SPC's forecast. This is our forecast, just to make that very clear. So I'm going to kind of zoom. Can I do that right there? If I kind of notch that over to the right, I'm going to cut off Pikeville just a little bit there. All right, so this is our Bullseye forecast. This is something new that we're doing this season. This does not mean, I know you see 5 out of 5 out there for Western Kentucky. This does not mean biblical storms are going to occur and everything's going to end. This is just a confidence map. So this is based off of confidence in whatever area that we drew there. Again, this is not a 5 out of 5, all red lights here. This is just confidence. So key messages on the left there. Timing is 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. Eastern time, west to east, as you saw on the model data there. I want to say real quickly, this is a W&K Bullseye map where we're simply displaying severe odds by area. The higher the number, the better the chance to see severe weather. For example, the 5 out of 5 zone is the Bullseye. All modes possible in red and pink areas. That's basically from Louisville to E-Town and Bowling Green to points to the west. Mainly a damaging wind risk in the other zone. So that's that orange and yellow zone where mainly a damaging wind risk is there. You'll still see some hail, maybe even a spin up or two, but the odds of it are not as high as western and central Kentucky. Large hail, 2 inches in diameter, damaging wind gusts up to 80 miles per hour, and a few tornadoes are on the table for, again, pretty much everywhere from orange to purple there. I think yellow and green is kind of where things begin to really drop off. So this is what we posted earlier, so if you want to see this map any further, it's on our pages on both Twitter and Facebook. What I want to show you now is the NAM3K model and kind of show you just a different idea that it has. It's pretty similar to the HRR model, especially on the onset. But the evolution of the storm is a little bit different here. So this has the storm knocking on West Kentucky's door a little bit faster, around 9 p.m. Eastern time, so about an hour faster, if you will. And as you can see, it's already kind of made into a uniform line there, and already actually begins its weakening by the time it gets to about the Cincinnati, Louisville, E-Town, Bowling Green, Hopkinsville areas. It already begins its weakening trend, whereas the HRR model has this being a strong line of storms until about the Lexington to Bowling Green areas, where it's a little more slanted in that line there. So again, a little bit of a difference there. Also notice how this is already a uniform, pretty organized line. By the time it gets into Western Kentucky, basically by the time it even is birthed, it's a pretty nice uniform line. Whereas the HRRR was a bit more broken, a bit more discreet, if you will. So that's a couple of the main big differences there. Also, this line is much, much, much thinner. I don't know what to believe at this point. Again, I think we'll have to wait till tomorrow morning to see how the environment is trending. I don't know if we'll see a thinner or wider line of storms. I don't know if we'll see repeated rounds. Again, we'll have to wait till tomorrow morning, see how the environment is trending with meso-analysis and see how things are going with that before we can really make that assumption. Because this has a very thin line of storms, real quick, in and out of the area by tomorrow morning. Again, not really doing much for Eastern Kentucky out there. Matter of fact, it doesn't really have a whole lot going out for Eastern Kentucky out there. So, again, kind of the differences in the model there. What I want to show you now is the famous map that's been rolling around. This is called the SIPS Deterministic Model Guidance. This basically tells us what this application does is it takes the model data, tries to compare it to storms that happened in the past, and tries to combine those two tools and spit out those zones where in the past these same parameters performed really well. All right, I hope that made sense because it's kind of confusing to explain there. All right, what I want to show you is that by Sunday night going into Monday morning, it has an 80 plus zone from pretty much a good chunk of Kentucky, basically where we drew our map almost to the T there. And then back out in Western Kentucky, it has an 85 plus zone, and just below Western Kentucky, it has a 90 plus zone. You'll see there at the bottom it reads 75% of significant tornadoes have a CWASP of 65% or higher. I will tell you that all of Kentucky is at 70% or higher. This does not mean we're going to have an outbreak of EF2 to EF5 tornadoes, but this does show you the potential for tomorrow. And it also has the greatest potential out in Western Kentucky, pretty high potential out in Central Kentucky, and drops the potential down toward Eastern Kentucky. So it pretty much matches up well with our forecast as well as the Storm Prediction Center's forecast. And that's pretty much all you should use that for. I'm going to close out my pen here real quickly. So that's basically how everything works there. I do want to show you real quickly. There's a lot of folks asking about timing. We did make a map on that as well. Just got to find it real quick. Timing map, there it is. This is the latest timing we've been thinking about. I made this earlier today. It might be a smidge off, but it's not far enough off to where we really need to change everything here. Again, Western Kentucky will see this first, and then it kind of arches out with the same arch of the storms there. 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. for Central or West Central Kentucky up to Northern Kentucky. 12 to 4 a.m. for Central Eastern Kentucky, and 1 to 5 a.m. out there for you folks in far Eastern Kentucky. And once again, the threat drops right around the second line right here. Again, you will still see severe weather and strong weather, in this gap here, but the threat level drops down considerably when you compare it back out to the threat level for like Evansville, Paducah, so on and so forth. Can you zoom in? Also, that's about as far as I can zoom in. But also, this map is already on our Facebook and Twitter as well if you do want to go to it and zoom in yourself. But if you get supercells, it'll be a little bit earlier. Yeah, you can have storms occur before these windows, but obviously we can't bank on that, and I'm not going to make a window 7 hours wide. So again, we could have cells pop up in front of these windows, especially for those first two zones on the left side there, 7 to 11 and 9 to 2. We could have cells pop up in front of those windows, but again, that's not a guarantee at this point. These are all in Eastern time. This is the timeline for Sunday evening. A hydrologic outlook is the amount of like rainfall and water and stuff. I want to point out, hey, if you're in these higher zones, again, this map is already on our page as well. You can go look at that whenever you like. I'm gonna click off of it for now. I do want to say, like, if you're in this orange zone, make sure you have preparations for shelter tomorrow. Again, even if we don't see a widespread tornadic activity outbreak, which I don't think we will anyway. These damaging winds and the large hail is enough of a threat to impact your shelter. So if you're in a trailer or a mobile home, or if you don't have a sturdy building, please take the time now to find one near you. Travel, maybe rent a cheap hotel room if you can, if you have that ability. So on and so forth. Because again, this is not a storm. If you know you're in a weak shelter, this is not the type of storm that you want to be in that weak shelter for. Make sure you have batteries for your weather radios. You can get a weather radio from Walmart for like 20 bucks. Just make sure it has the NOAA sticker on there. The same thing that you see down here. All right. Make sure it has that's like 20 bucks at Walmart. Make sure you have batteries for it. You can Google which station you're supposed to be set to. You can just Google, NOAA weather radio station for Hardinsburg, Kentucky, whatever it might be, and it'll immediately pop up there for you. Very easy to do. Also can save your life. I've seen that multiple times where cell towers have gone down and people weren't able to get alerts on their phones. Weather radio came into play really well. Also, weather radio will work to wake you up a lot better than your phone can. It's very loud, trust me. Also, make sure you have batteries for your flashlights. Again, this is all worst case scenario type of stuff, folks. But obviously, we hope we don't have to use this stuff, but you want to have it and not have to use it versus need it and not have it. Right? So take the little, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, run to Walmart, whatever it might be, Dollar General, and get that stuff and potentially save your life. Again, you want to have it and not have to use it versus the other way around. Renji, no, I do not think so. I think Eastern Kentucky, once again, as you can see from the map here, is where the threat drops down. I do think you will see strong to even severe weather, but as compared to back out here to Owensboro, Madisonville, Paducah, so on and so forth, the threat is just not it's not comparable. Are you think there's going to be a lot of power outages? I don't really get into that game too much. Once again, I just know that they're possible when you're talking about this level of wind that we're going to be seeing. It doesn't take it doesn't take a smart guy to go put two and two together when you get this much wind and hail. There's probably going to be some power outages. So that's why I'm talking about, hey, make sure you have these backups in place. Again, Murray's in that orange zone. Obviously, I'm not going to get into too many backyards, folks. But again, if you're in these higher zones, let me go to pull up our other map here. Again, I'm going to start getting out of the backyard again because I end up just sitting here for like 45 minutes to an hour answering the same areas. But again, if you're in that pink or red zone and you should know where you're at on a map, again, this is definitely something you need to be paying attention to. All forecasts and all updates, even this orange zone, you need to be paying attention to. Again, I think this is almost a statewide event, but these orange, red, and especially the red and purple zones or pink, whatever you want to call that color, those are the areas where I think has the best potential for the highest impact of large to very large hail, damaging winds, and yes, even a few tornadoes. Is there any way for the storm to weaken? I'm trying to get some of these comments. Is there any way for the storm to weaken a smidge or at least a tornado threat? I think we're pretty much set in stone for now. Again, when you start to get within that 24-hour period, there's not going to be a lot of changes. Any changes that are made, I will let you know tomorrow morning. Yeah, I mean, Tony, even if you're in that yellow zone, I mean, again, listen. And by the way, Moorhead, I believe, is in my orange zone. Um, Again, if you know that you're in a weak structure, take the time to get to a better structure. Again, you're talking about the wind that we have for tomorrow. I think again we're gonna have numerous 60 to 70 mile per hour reports. Again, maybe out Moorhead it'll begin to drop down a little bit, but that's a decision for you to make on whether you want to chance that or not. Rainfall amounts don't look too bad with this one unless we start getting some steadier stalling showers, maybe 1 to 2 inches in the most areas. Yes, I do think more wind and hail rather than tornadic in the orange areas. Yes, I do. Russellville's in that red zone. Again, pay attention to all forecast. Owensboro's right on the line of pink and red, so act like you're in the pink. I have no idea who Christopher Roach is. Again, all times are in Eastern time. Sorry if I'm being like real blunt. I'm trying to make sure I'm getting as many questions as I can before I run out of voice here. So, but please, if I'm answering your question, it sounds blunt. Don't think I'm being rude. I'm just trying to get as many questions as possible. No, this will not be anything like December 10th, 2021. This is a different storm system. How many rounds are there tomorrow for clarification? It just depends on whether that outflow boundary gets sparked or not. There could be as many as 2 to 3 rounds tomorrow. There could be as little as 1 round tomorrow. Again, that's a detail we'll have to iron out tomorrow morning. How's it looking after Wednesday? I know you mentioned more severe after, but will they be to these capacities? I think this is number two. I think Wednesday is by far number one. Wednesday is probably our biggest threat since May 26th of 2024. Wednesday is probably going to be our biggest threat since then. Again, if the current trends hold, that is. And then after that, it looks like just a bunch, and I do mean a bunch of rainfall. Can you explain how terrain affects the winds and weather in different parts of the state? I won't get into the nerdy and ditty gritty of it, but just know that storms don't like having to fight higher elevations, which is why you typically don't see as many severe storms out here in eastern Kentucky, or by the time they get to eastern Kentucky, they begin to die down because storms don't like having to fight the higher terrain. It messes with the organization of the inflow of the storms, which is the reason that storms can go. Whereas out here in western Kentucky, and even getting close to the I-65 line there, it's a bit more flat on that side of the state, which is why you see more severe weather on this side. So Wednesday will be a worse storm system, Tommy asks, and I will say that it has the potential to be. I think we're a little bit too far out to know the exact details, but if models are right at the moment, it's not something that I'm looking forward to forecasting, and I'll leave it at that. Again, Michael, this is not the SPC's forecast. You can see it in big bold letters right there. This is not an SPC forecast. This is our Bullseye forecast, which is basically just a confidence map. So don't see 5 out of 5 there and immediately think, oh my goodness, we're gonna die. No, this is just a confidence map. So it means in this area that we've drawn here, I have the highest confidence of all modes of severe weather, and then it drops as you head to the lower parts of the numbers there. Again, big bold letters right there, not an SPC forecast. I didn't want anyone to get confused. Do you have a Felicity track map? I mean, I could show that, but I think that's so pointless. I'm gonna flat out say it. I hate when Chris Bailey does that and he just posts that thing all the time because it's just it gets you all worked up. Here it is right here. And again, this is not anything really crazy. And updraft Felicity doesn't necessarily mean tornadoes. It can mean any storm that is updrafting, which is any storm that's updrafting can produce winds, it can produce hail, it can produce tornadoes, it can produce absolutely nothing but heavier rains. So I don't really like showing this map too much because I think it's just irresponsible without actually educating folks on what it actually means. And I can't stand when other people post it. I'm sorry, but I can't stand. It's one of those things that I will get on my soapbox about. I just can't stand it. Oh, okay, thought I missed something. No, I will let you guys know if they upgrade it. But May 26th of last year was a bad one. Yeah, and unfortunately, I wasn't going to bring this up too much, but the biggest comparison that so whenever we see, I'll let you guys know the process on this. Whenever we see an event start to unfold on model data, the first thing that we do is obviously check the upper layers, right? The 500 millibar, several thousand feet above our head. The 850 millibar, 5,000 feet above our head, so on and so forth. What we do is we first check that. And then we begin to find comparisons. And then once we get to about the 2 day out timeline, which is about Friday night to Saturday for this storm system, we begin to try and find storm systems in the past that match or are very similar to what we're seeing on models for this system. And we do that with every snow system, every severe system, anything that we have that needs any type of eyeballs on it. We don't rely just on models. My biggest thing that I rely on is past events that compare to the energy that we see, the pattern that we see, the flow, so on and so forth, right? And I can tell you that the biggest comparison, the main comparison that keeps popping up to this storm system is May 26th of 2024. Now, that does not mean we're going to see the exact same results as we did on May 26th of 2024, which, by the way, if you're somehow under a rock, that day produced over 20 tornadoes in Kentucky, I think a few of which were significant and violent, and over hundreds of damaging wind reports, quite a lot of damaging hail reports as well. even a few significant wind reports. So again, I'm not saying we're going to see that exact same result, but as far as everything's being set up with a weak trough, with a low amplitude, low pressure, all those nerdy words, right? The comparison is May 26th of 2024. That's the best analog for the storm system. Again, not to say we're going to see the exact same results, but as far as all the research we've done, and I promise you, we've done a lot of research on this, because this has been a bit of a tricky forecast. I don't think this is 100% set, riding, set sell here. I think this is a pretty tricky one. Wednesday, that one is pretty firm at this point. Again, that can change, but pretty firm at this point. This one's a bit more complex. Even though we're only 24 hours out, there's a couple of questions that still remain. Again, how does that outflow boundary spark in the morning from Missouri to Illinois? Where does it eventually set up? Do we see storms spark off of that? Right? Do we see a lot of rain in the late afternoon here in Kentucky or Tennessee that's going to help to block the moisture from coming up? There's still a lot of questions at play here. There's also not an impressive amount of wind energy above our heads. How does that play into things? But we also, on May 26th of 2024, didn't have very much wind energy above our heads. As a matter of fact, we had very, very, very little. My advice is, or my rule of thumb is, it only takes one storm. Once one storm breaks through that cap out there in Missouri, Western Kentucky, it's going to be a full green light. Again, those are some things that we're watching. Just wanted to point that out there for you. Yeah, I just don't like when people never make their own forecasts and claim that they make their own forecasts. Was May of 24 the storm that wrecked Beachmont and Drakesboro? I'd have to go back and look more specifically. That night's kind of a blur for me because we went from forecasting for however many hours we were on live with you guys to the next day having the birth of our first child. So that was a very long stretch for George and family there. Got all of our prep done today, thankfully. Good stuff. That's what I like to see. A lot. I mean, again, it honestly takes 20 to 30 minutes to prepare for a storm. I mean, really. And you'd rather have to do that and not need it rather than, of course, need it and not have it. Again, all these maps that I'm showing are on our page. If you need to zoom in, look differently, whatever it might be, all these maps are on our Twitter and Facebook for you to go to, zoom in, so on and so forth. No, Lisa. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget May 26th of 2024. One, because it was one of our worst outbreaks of the 2020s. It was one of our worst outbreaks since 2011. Um, Again, it doesn't really get talked about a whole lot for some reason. I'm not really quite sure why, but here I'll show you real quickly. And again, this is not to say that we're going to see this tomorrow. Okay. Again, this is just something for us to reference. Okay, because you can have the exact same setup, but not the exact same results. So here is here is May 26th of 2024. Can you tell where Kentucky's at on that? No, you can't because there's that many damage reports that were issued, and this for some reason this day does not get talked about enough in weather history. I know it's relatively new, but the red that you're seeing there is 74 tornado reports, and the bulk of those being in Kentucky, Illinois, and Missouri. Over 1,000 damaging wind reports. All right, and bulk of those once again being in Kentucky, toward Ohio, toward West Virginia. Over 300 significant hail reports. Bulk of those once again being in Missouri, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So once again, I don't think May 26th of 2024 was talked about enough. This is also the night where I fully believe that we need a full camera network in our state to be able to see storms because a lot of these went either unwarned or were late warned. And again, that's not a knock on the National Weather Service. That's just nighttime storms. This was also a very weak low amplitude night, so the radars didn't look as great. Also, a lot of these storms are, if you look at them, they're going into radar gaps or they're going right into radar sites, and radars lose those. So again, this is one of the biggest nights that set me off my initiative to do some things. And again, the next morning, I birthed, we birthed, I should say, or my wife birthed, I should say, our first child. So this was quite a long period. If you remember correctly, this entire week in May before this was very, very, very stormy. I will tell you that out of all my time, I've been doing this for now, oh my goodness, 7 years. I think 7 or 8 years now. I've been doing this at least for this page. This was by far the most exhausting week I've ever had in my life. most exhausting week I've ever had in my life. Again, that's not to say we're going to see the same results. Again, because you can have the exact same thing and get different results. But I will just say that the pattern is kind of similar. And again, I just want to make it real clear that was not a knock on the National Weather Service. That was not a knock on anything, because quite frankly, we missed some of them on the radar as well, because they were either going into radar gaps or they went into radar towers. And once they go into those two spots, it's really hard to see what exactly is happening. But I will say on the more important things, they hit it very well that night. That was a very well forecasted black night by not only the Storm Prediction Center but our local NWS offices. That was a very great night by them. All right, I think that's about it for now because we're kind of rambling at this point. We've hit the 45-minute mark and it's 8:30, so I want to see the new models that are coming in. If you guys do not mind, I will have an update out for you in post form probably in about 2 hours. I will say on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, just pay attention to updates tonight, guys. No one needs to panic. I don't think this is going to be. Again, I made it kind of alluded to it in my post earlier. I don't think this is a biblical storm of the ages. I don't think it's anything like that. But this is certainly our biggest threat of the year. It will quickly be passed on Wednesday, so it won't last very long. But I do think this is something that everyone needs to pay attention to because, again, hail damage for your vehicles. Make sure you have tarps for your vehicles. I'm trying to think of anything else. Batten down the hatches outside if you have anything loose that you want to keep from blowing away. Get those things staked down to the ground. Batteries for your weather radios and flashlights. Again, these are all worst case scenario preparations that we hope we don't have to use, but you'd rather have them, not have to use them, than, of course, the opposite way. All right. So, if you missed anything in this broadcast, this video will be available on our YouTube and Facebook for you to watch at any point that you like. Also, all the maps we displayed on this broadcast here is already on our Twitter and Facebook. You can go follow and look at those maps there. Of course, I'll give you an update here in a couple of hours. And then once this storm system is passed, we'll talk a lot more about Wednesday. I'm George Herbig, Chief Forecaster here with Weather Now Kentucky. Thank you so much for tuning into our broadcast. Until next time, stay safe, friends.